Hey, it's Joel David Moore, and you're listening to WithoutYourHead.com.
Candy apples and razor blades, little did I soon ingraze. I remember Halloween this day, anything goes, burning bodies hanging from poles. I remember Halloween.
We're back. We're welcome Adam Green to Without Your Head. Welcome to the show.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Not much. How you doing?
Doing good. I was just saying I'm a little sick. I've been on so many planes in the past, 3 weeks. I was in London and then came back to L.A. and then went to Texas and then back to L.A. and then to New Jersey and back to L.A. and now I'm on my way to Spain. And somewhere on one of these planes, somebody got me sick. So I'm trying to hang in there, but it's I kind of feel like I'm campaigning with this movie. It's like when you see presidents doing this shit with when they're trying to get elected, just a different city every day, and they start looking more and more like death. That's kind of me.
Well, that could be an idea for your next movie.
Yeah, right.
So it sounds more glamorous than it is, then.
Yeah, it definitely. It definitely has its glamorous moments. Like once you actually get to start meeting fans and stuff like that, it's totally worth it. But the hours sitting in the airport and flying economy, just like everybody else, it really sucks.
Yeah, that's no fun.
My flight to Spain is, I think, 14 and a half hours with a layover in London. So that's going to be as much fun as a bag of dicks.
Well, some people might find that pretty fun.
Sure.
Let everybody know, first of all, the movie's Hatchet.
Yeah.
You can find out more information on hatchetmovie.com. If anybody doesn't know, you want to just give a brief summary of what the movie's about?
Sure. Hatchet is a old school slasher movie. Basically, my sort of philosophy in making this movie was that I loved the 80s stuff that I grew up on. I loved that there were monsters. I loved that there was gore. I loved that there was nudity and that the horror movies were rated R. Unfortunately, the scripts usually were a little lacking, which even the biggest fans can admit. A lot of the sequels and stuff kind of got a little stupid. And then in the 90s, it came back really hard with Scream, which was great because the script was so good, but we didn't have monsters anymore. We didn't have gore. We didn't have nudity. And pretty soon all the horror movies were PG-13. And so what I kind of tried to do with this was take what I liked about both and put them together and sort of bring back that unstoppable monster and gore that's all done in camera with latex, no CGI, and kind of bring back the magic show. So that's really what Hatchet is. The storyline is in New Orleans. For anybody who's ever been there before, they probably know about this. They do these swamp tours, and there's a few places that do haunted swamp tours at night. And it's pretty much a total rip-off because they just take you through the swamp at night, and there's marsh gas and stuff, and they tell you all these, spooky, silly ghost stories about the marsh gas, and they say that it's ghosts and all this stuff. And so in the movie, it's a group of people on one of those tours, and the boat ends up sinking, and things just go horribly wrong for them. And it's probably one of the most violent things that's been out there in a while. So very excited about that.
Ooh. I think Intro had a question about CGI.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering, what's your opinions on CGI in movies nowadays?
I'm not completely anti-CGI. I mean, one of my favorite films is Jurassic Park. I love Lord of the Rings. I think if it's done with the appropriate budget and by the right people, that it works. I mean, no matter what, it never really looks real, but if it's at least not offensive and you can let yourself go and try to believe that it's real, like all the landscapes and stuff in Lord of the Rings, I never had any problem with that at all. But when people try to use it in order to sort of skimp and make it easier, or when they use it on a budget, for instance, Freddy vs. Jason, which actually had a pretty big budget, why did they need CG blood sprays and stuff like that? Like, that was ridiculous. It just starts to look more and more cartoony. So with this, we didn't use any CGI with the makeup effects or any of the deaths, and some of them are so elaborate there are people that are trying to say that we did. One of the screenings that we had in New York at Tribeca, there was a guy in the audience that was challenging me and saying, when you ripped that woman's face in half, it had to have been CG. There's no way you could have done it, which was a huge compliment to myself, my director of photography, and of course John Beekler, who designed the effects. It's pretty cool. It's a lot like the old Savini stuff back in the day when it was a magic show and you would walk out wondering, how did they do that?
I'm a big. I think we're all big Tom Savini fans here.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, how important do you think gore is to like a horror movie?
It depends. I mean, like a haunted house story, which is really the only stuff that actually scares me. If it's something with ghosts, or for instance, The Exorcist, there's no gore in that film at all, really, and that really scares me. But something like A Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween, like the original Halloween, there's really no gore. So you don't always have to have it, but if you're going to make a slasher movie, which is what Hatchet is, that's kind of what you're paying to see. Like, you want to see some people get fucked up. I mean, that's why you went to see the movie in the first place. So it's, I think for a slasher movie, you have to have it. Some of these PG-13 movies that are coming out now are just silly, and I try to be lenient with those films because clearly there is an audience for it. For instance, just because I don't enjoy the Teletubbies doesn't mean that the audience that it's for doesn't enjoy it. So PG-13 horror movies are for, that age group, so I definitely get it. But my problem is that Hollywood knows that we as an audience, as horror fans, are going to go see basically every horror movie that comes out in the theater, just because we're glad to have a horror movie in the theater. And they kind of capitalize on that, and they shoot for the PG-13 rating just so that more people can go see it and they can make more money. I mean, how many times have you guys gone to see a movie that you totally know was going to suck? And it did suck, and when you walked out, you said it sucked, and you probably still bought the DVD. Like, it's just what we do. My DVD collection is so awful, some of the movies I have, but I'm a horror fan, and that's kind of what I live with. So I hope that the majority of people who are like me, who go to see Hatchet, at least feel like they got what they paid for, and it's a movie that I made for them. I really, it's the most selfish thing I'll probably ever make, because I just made the movie that I wanted to see. I didn't care about reinventing the wheel. I didn't care about social commentary or anything like that. I just made the most balls-to-the-wall, fun, gory slasher movie that I could, and thankfully people are embracing it, and it's been doing so well at all these film festivals all over the world, and you hope that it's going to go this far, but you never really believe that it will. And the fact that we're going to get a theatrical release is just crazy. So I'm very excited about that.
Even the name of the movie is pretty basic, Hatchet. Is that something you really just had in mind, just kind of straightforward, something you really want to see? It's funny. I used to joke about it when I was talking. People would ask me why I love horror movies, and I would say, some of them are so basic. It's just, people running from a guy with a glove with knives, or, this or that. And I used to say, someday I'm going to make a movie called Hatchet, just so that someday they make like a Hatchet 4. Because once you get past 3, it's just retarded. I mean, like when you get into like Friday the 13th 8 and stuff like that, like how do you expect people to take it seriously anymore? He's taking Manhattan.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was just saying this at the Fangoria convention that no matter how many sequels to Hatchet that there are, I promise I will never send Victor Crowley to Manhattan or to space.
Or to outer space. I think that's a death of a movie when they time travel or go to outer space.
Yeah, at some point somebody on that set must have stopped and been like, okay, wait a minute, time out. Like, are you guys serious? Like, he's in space. But of course that movie had the frozen face smash on the counter, which made it okay that he was in space, in my opinion. Like, once that happened, I was like, all right, cool. Although they did kill the hottest chick first, and I thought that was kind of a waste. They should have frozen somebody else's face first.
Right,
for sure.
Is that something you really wanted to do in this movie? Has some creative death scenes?
Yeah, I think that part of the fun of these movies is seeing like what are they going to do next. and so I tried to do deaths that nobody's seen before. It's kind of scary, actually, but the idea of just stabbing somebody with a knife, like, I don't care, but if you're going to put a belt sander in a chick's mouth and take out her teeth, like, that's really cool. So we tried to just make it just so over the top, which is part of the fun of the movie. Like, if somebody gets a limb ripped off, the blood shoots like 40 feet in the air, and it's like all over the place, and it's a little bit back to like the Evil Dead days of gore, which is why I'm hoping. Apparently, there's a lot of talk that we're going to have a hard time keeping the movie intact when it goes to the theaters, and I'm hoping that people see that because the movie is so fun that they'll let the gore slide. There's nothing that's like, there's nobody getting raped. There's nothing like really heavy like that. I mean, it's just so in your face that hopefully the MPAA will have a sense of humor about it. Although I know a sense of humor isn't really what they're known for with horror movies, but. Did you guys, maybe you guys know this story, but John Buechler was telling me this when we were in pre-production. Friday the 13th 7, when he did that, there was a scene where Jason punches into somebody's chest and rips out their heart. And the MPAA wouldn't let that go without giving it a rated X. Yet the same summer, Steven Spielberg did it in Temple of Doom and got a PG. Oh, yeah. So it all kind of depends on the size of the movie, who's behind it. And me, this really being the first thing that I'm actually going to be sort of known for, the MPAA could care less what I think. So we've been waiting to show them until we actually had a distributor, which I was hoping that by the time we did this call, I'd be able to say who it's going to be, but apparently I'm not allowed to say anything yet. So it's the most distasteful part of making movies. Everybody thinks that it's just the actual shooting of it. But all the politics that go into it afterwards, like, this was my first time really going through it, but it's enough to make you, like, not want to do it anymore. It takes all the fun out of it, and luckily we're with a place that I actually wanted to be with, so I'm really excited about that. But the process of getting from finishing the movie to having distribution was so weird. Like, the distributors who come to the first screening that you do, our first one was at Tribeca, that was the first time we showed anybody. And they purposely, like, sit there with their arms crossed trying to act like they don't like it so that the other distributors will think that they don't like it, but then they're outside making offers on it and calling on their phone from the theater, and it's just like...
Poker face.
Hollywood is just a massive extension of high school. And it's like all, like, the worst people of high school run Hollywood. Like, so for those of you that aren't in it, like, you're not missing anything. There's a lot of good people, though. When I first moved here, I'm from Boston, and I had a really tight group of friends that I grew up with that I'm still very tight with. And I got out here, and I just hated it for my first 2 years because everybody out here works in movies or wants to work in movies. Everybody's a producer, a writer, a director, and it's really hard to make genuine friends. But once I did, you can kind of start to see through it. And even on the studio side, the executives, the suits, there's a lot of really good people out here who really do still love movies, which is kind of the problem. Is Hollywood's a business. It's not really an art form. The movies are an art form, but the system is a business. So you have, like, two complete opposites trying to work together, and it's definitely hard.
Is there any other directors, former indie directors who's tried to give you some advice?
As far as indie directors go,
one really.
Well, let's see. I mean, John Buechler was really my mentor on this film because he had been there and done it, and he was just great. But when it came time for, like, the sales process and all that stuff, I spoke a lot with Eli Roth about it and just kind of running things by him, like, is this normal? Should this be this way? What should I do about this? And he was extremely helpful because he had just gone through it, a few years before with Cabin Fever. Mm-hmm. So everybody really, for the most part, is extremely helpful. It's funny because I kind of come from the comedy world, and in comedy, everybody's very competitive. And even like when you're writing on a TV show and you're all sitting around the table coming up with jokes, some of the writers will purposely try not to laugh at your jokes so that they can get their own jokes in the script and not yours. But with horror people, everybody is so supportive of each other, and they're so happy that somebody else is making a horror movie, basically because they want to see it. This is a genre where if you're making an independent horror movie, you're doing it because you love it. Because chances are you're not going to get rich off of it. It's probably going to go straight to video. So if you're doing this, it's because you really have a passion for it. Other aspects of filmmaking, I think there could be other incentives for why you're doing it. But if you're like standing there in 30-degree rain in the middle of the night throwing blood on some girl, like, you clearly love what you're doing.
Right. You got a question, Incher?
You have some horror living legends in your film. Tony Todd, Robert Englund, Kane Hodder. What was it like having them all in your film?
It was like a big wet dream come true, because I'm such a fanboy. Like, I'm calling you guys from my office right now where I have action figures for every one of those guys. I have, like, stuffed dolls. I have every poster, I'm just, like, the biggest dork you've ever met. And so when I actually got to work with those guys, it was crazy. One of the best moments was standing on set, and Robert Englund was on one side of me, and Kane was on the other, all dressed up as Victor Crowley, which is a character that I thought of when I was just 8 years old. And I'm looking at both of these guys who are just, like, talking to each other about how cool the makeup is. And I'm just thinking, who am I? Like, if someone could have told me this when I was 13, I would have said that they were high. And I kind of thought I was just standing there with those guys. And they're so great because they don't phone anything in. Like, all three of those guys, like, they bring everything to every word they say. Everything they do needs to be, like, understood. They don't just capitalize on the fact that they're horror icons and they are often offered parts in different movies and stuff like that. One of the best stories of how we got them, with Robert Englund, we kind of contacted his agent, and the agent sort of told the casting director, like, you guys don't really have enough money. If it's a part in a horror movie, you know, Robert's worth a ton of money because of, like, the foreign dollars and this and this and that. So, like, we weren't even going to be able to get the script to him. And that night, I went to the first season of Masters of Horror. It was the kickoff party. And I'm standing there, and I see Robert Englund walk in, and my friends were like, why don't you go say something to him? But I saw all these other guys coming up to him, handing him business cards and things, and I was like, you know, I don't want to be that guy. Like, I can't stand. Everybody knows you have to network in Hollywood, but there's a cool way to do it, and there's the just loser way to do it, and it felt like everybody there was doing the loser way. And I mean, to go off subject for a second here when I'm talking about that, I know a lot of people who probably tune into your show want to do this, and there's definitely something to be said about the guy who just, you know, runs up to people and hands them their script and tries to talk themselves up. But that's not really doing anything for you, because afterwards people are making fun of you. And so what you really need to do is build your own network of people that are personally vested in you. Like, the way I did it was when I got out here, I was an assistant to producers. I was an assistant to TV showrunners, like all kinds of people like that, getting coffee, doing menial things. But I made friends with other assistants who wound up becoming agents and development execs and stuff like that. And so I kind of have, like, a circle of people that are my network, and they're my genuine friends. So that's real networking as far as I'm concerned. But, like, going to a party and handing out business cards, it's not going to do anything for anybody. It's just going to sort of look like you're whoring yourself out there. So anyway, so I didn't want to do that to Robert Englund. I didn't say anything to him. A few minutes later, he comes over and taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around, and I'm, like, freaking out because Freddie's talking to me, and he's like, where'd you get that shirt? And I'm like, my what? He's like, your T-shirt. Where'd you get your shirt? And I was wearing this Manson shirt from the Mechanical Animals tour, 98, and it's a Suicide King on the back. And they only sold it on that tour. It's kind of a hard shirt to get, and for anybody who's like a collector on eBay, it's not one of the ones that's always on there. But I actually got it at the show. And I'm like, well, you can't get it anymore. And he's like, oh, my producing partner made a movie called Suicide King, and I really want to get that shirt for him. And he's just staring at me, and I'm like, don't think I'm taking my shirt off for you, dude. Like, I love Nightmare on Elm Street, but I'm not that much, you know. And so he walks away. And later that night, when I got home, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try. And I looked on eBay, and I happened to find the same shirt in a size large, brand new clothing for like $75 in 2 minutes. And so I outbid whoever the guy was who thought he was going to get it. And I called Robert's agent, and I'm like, I want to send him this shirt as a gift. And his agent was like, I was standing right there. Why didn't you say who you were? I said, it's not my style, but I just want to send him the shirt as a gift because I know he wants it. And so sure enough, my script rose up to the top of the pile, and he actually read it. And the next day, we actually have this on the DVD for the behind the scenes. My assistant comes into the office and says, Robert Englund's on the phone for you. And it's 30 minutes of me just on the phone saying nothing but, thank you, sir, Mr. Englund, sir, thank you. And him just going off on, like, how great he thinks the script is and that this could be the next icon, and he's so eager to do it, and all because of that Marilyn Manson shirt. So that's a pretty funny story. But that's kind of how we got everybody. It was just weird things like that.
Mm-hmm. Does it make you proud that, like, so many people have been giving it good reviews, and a lot of people in, like, the horror genre saying it might be the next big icon and everything?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's great to hear that stuff, but you kind of have to take it all with a grain of salt. Like, right. We've been extremely fortunate that we really haven't gotten a bad review. And that's great, but we are going to get a bad review at some point. I mean, it happens to everybody. It's going to happen, and I can't take that seriously either. I mean, I'm confident in the film. I've seen it with enough audiences at this point that I know it works, and the reviews are great, but they're still just reviews. It's just somebody's opinion, and I'm sure there's going to be people who see it who don't agree with the reviews or do, and when they start saying he's like the next icon, I think there's still a ways to go before we can actually say that. I mean, that's obviously it's very flattering, but I think to be an icon, you have to have some sort of longevity. Mm-hmm. So let's see what happens if there's a Hatchet 2, and if it lives up to the first one, and then maybe Victor Crowley will be a horror icon. I mean, that would be insane. But I think it's still a little early to be saying that. But I mean, obviously, yeah, when you hear it, it's like, wow, thank you. But you got to keep a level head about it all.
Right. It recently won Audience Choice Award for Best Picture at the Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Was that something you take a little more seriously because the audience picked it?
Yeah. Like, it's funny, but if like a jury picked it, it would be cool, and you'd be like, awesome, they liked it. But it's a jury, and who knows who was on it and what their reasons were for voting for the things they did. But when it's the Audience Choice Award, and that literally means that everybody was sitting there, like, voted on a card, and they liked yours the best. I mean, that's like, it doesn't really get better than that. And like, especially that audience at Fantastic Fest, like, that's like a hardcore audience, and those people were really, really hyped up to see this, and they were really, like, serious about it. And a lot of them were very skeptical. They were admitting it beforehand. I was walking through the line, and there was a line before the midnight show that was like the whole lobby of the theater, out the door, outside, and a lot of the people didn't get in because it sold out so fast, and it was really scary. Plus, Andrew Bjarnski shows up, who I'd never met before, but like I said, I'm a total horror fanboy, and he's just like, comes up to me, he's like, yeah, I saved your seat next to me. I'm like, awesome, so now I get to watch it with all this stress and Leatherface. And he's next to me, and every time Victor Crowley's killing somebody, he's just laughing, and he's elbowing me like as hard as he can. That's fucking great. That was fucking great, dude. And I'm so black and blue from sitting next to him, like, it's still great. And then at some point, he just kind of switched over from calling me Adam to calling me Eric. And it's one of those things, like, when somebody calls you the wrong name, if you don't correct them right away, you kind of can't at that point because you missed your opportunity. So he probably still thinks I'm Eric, but whatever, and that's cool. My brother's name's Eric, so I guess it's all right.
Close enough.
Right, yeah. You talked about, like, a lot of the death scenes and stuff. Did anybody think of anything that you just thought was, like, too crazy that you didn't want to put in the movie? Or just too over the top?
Not really. I mean, I wrote all the deaths, and they all stayed in as is. There was one that I actually tried to take out because I didn't think that it made sense. And just to kind of go back in time, the first short film I ever made was called Columbus Day Weekend, and it was I I made it for $8 with my friends in somebody's backyard, and it was like this big fat Jason and this big fat Michael Myers stalked the same campsite by mistake, and then they're gay for each other, and that got like bootlegged all over. That was really what got me started in Hollywood, and it's like at some point it will resurface on the internet again.
I was just going to say, I'm about to look that one up.
It used to be readily accessible, but I kind of had to take that down now because I don't want to get sued.
Right.
But it was, I mean, it's definitely funny, but there was a gag in there where this girl's trying to run away from Fat Jason, and he just looks down, and there's like an electrical cord running through the woods plugged into a fan, and he takes the fan and kills her with it, because we were just trying to make fun of how they always seem to find the craziest weapons in the middle of nowhere. So Victor Crowley has a shed full of tools and stuff, but one of the deaths was he puts a belt sander in this girl's mouth, and it's something that we did in Columbus Day. Michael Myers did it to somebody. But then I was thinking, I'm like, there's no such thing as a gas-powered belt sander, so he'd have to plug it in. So what are we going to do? Have like an extension cord running into like the burned-down house? Like, it doesn't make sense. And as soon as I said that, all the guys in the effects shop they were pleading with me. They're like, please don't take this death out. This is the coolest death. And the production designer said, how about this? If you give me 48 hours, I will try to build a functioning gas-powered sander. And if I can do it, that means that it could exist in real life. And then will you use it? And I said, fine, thinking there's no way he can do this in 48 hours. Sure enough, he shows up on set 48 hours later, and he's pulling the cord on a gas-powered belt sander, and the thing works. And 2 hours later, it's in the girl's mouth. So it's, you know, and it's not even like anything is necessarily realistic when you're talking about a deformed man who's back from the dead and ripping people limb from limb in a swamp. But for some reason, I just didn't want the belt sander to seem too hokey. I mean, it's definitely crazy when it happens because it sort of comes out of nowhere. But the audience reaction in here in Germany and London has just been like people just kind of cheering and screaming. And though there's one death that's actually been bringing people to their feet in some showings, which is the one that everyone's talking about online that we show at the conventions, which is the woman getting her face ripped in half. And literally people just all stand and start cheering, which is fun because I remember seeing these movies like when I saw, I think it was Friday 7 when Jason pulled out the weed whacker, and the audience I was with in Boston all just stood up and started screaming and cheering, and that was the point that I realized, like, wait a minute, like, Jason's the good guy. Like, he's the hero, like, he's the one that we're rooting for. Because they were never really scary, you just wanted to see how they were going to kill the next person. And then, you know, ultimately you wanted to see their face at the end, and usually ended up being kind of a letdown, but that's all right.
A lot of people have said that it's also a very funny movie.
Yeah.
Was there ever any fear of maybe having too much comedy in it, that it might get in the way of the horror?
There was definitely some talk up front of having to be careful to keep the comedy out of the horror, because I think all the best horror movies have funny moments in them. This movie is supposed to be like a roller coaster ride where it almost seems like it's not a horror movie for a second, and then you're painfully reminded what you're in for. But what we did is we always kept the scares separate from the jokes. And I think the jokes helped make the cast a lot more likable, which was another problem with the early slashers, was that you never really cared about any of these people and you didn't even know their names. Like, I think there's probably 25 Fridays, Nightmares, and Halloweens, and if you can name like more than 3 supporting characters' names, like you're crazy. But they were just they were very forgettable. So by making the whole cast really likable and really funny, it just changed the dynamic of the film, and you actually felt bad for them. At the same time, there's nobody who's just downright stupid in this. For instance, they never say, okay, let's all split up. There's never a part where actually when the shit starts to hit the fan, one of my favorite moments in the movie is Dion Richmond, who plays Marcus. The first thing he does is climb up a tree, because I always used to say that, like, if Jason's coming after you or Michael Myers is coming after you, just climb a fucking tree, because at least you can see where they're coming from. I mean, of course, they would then just appear in the tree next to you and get you or something, but they treat it very real, and they're legitimately scared, and they just keep saying, like, this is so fucked up, what the hell's going on? But because the first half of the movie you were laughing with them, it really kind of helps. And when you walk out of it, like, I usually try to leave the theater like right before the end so I can see people's faces when they walk out. And at this point, it's kind of easy to do because most people don't know what I look like, so I can really blend in and nobody knows that I'm there. And it's just really fun to see people walking out with these huge smiles on their faces. And in some cases, at Tribeca, like the same people, because it was 5 nights there, kept coming back night after night, which was also a good feeling because it's just a fun movie.
Mm-hmm. What other places coming up can people come and see the movie?
Let's see. I think there's only one more chance in America to see it. It's going to be in Barcelona in Spain on Friday the 13th and Saturday the 15th. And then in Los Angeles, it's going to be playing at Screenfest on Hollywood Boulevard on October 21st, which is a Saturday. And then that'll be it until it actually comes out. We were only going to do one American festival, and then that was it. But when Harry Knowles, like, handpicks your movie himself, you don't say no. Mm-hmm. So I had to explain to the distributor that we were still negotiating with at the time. I'm like, look, Harry Knowles wants the movie in Fantastic Fest. I'm bringing it. Like, I know you don't want to show anybody anymore. And it's like, the reason why they don't want it out too much is that you don't want to be overexposed. But with this movie, there's nothing we can do about that because it's like the internet hype. We had nothing to do with this aside from building our website. And everybody knows about it, but you don't want to hype it too much, and you don't want to get people's expectations to the roof and all that other stuff. We already have the good reviews. There's really no reason to be showing it anymore until it comes out. But as far as when it comes out, I was hearing the end of January. But originally what they were saying was they would open it limited as an NC-17, and then after that they would put it out everywhere as a rated R. But now they're actually thinking they're not going to do the NC-17 one, they're just going to do the rated R one, and they're going to do it wide right away, which would mean that they would probably, I would imagine they're going to hold till February or March if they're going to do like 2,000 screens or something like that. But I still haven't seen like any sort of contract or paperwork or anything like that. I just know in the initial deal with the distributor it was a guaranteed theatrical film. So that was kind of what we were holding for. Because some of the other places that I don't want to name are notorious for picking up independent movies and then shelving them for like years, and then all of a sudden they come out on video, or like what happened with Feast, which was, did you guys see Feast yet?
No.
It's so good. Like, I mean, whatever. People will say what they will. I'm sure it's not the greatest movie ever, but it is such a good time, and it's such a shame that was only in theaters for 2 nights. But things like that, like, you don't want that to happen to your movie, so the deal that we have was a guaranteed theatrical, so that's really all I know. And then, like, the speculation of when they're saying it should come out, but it'll definitely be out in the next few months.
Mm-hmm. If they put out, yeah, what were you saying, Philippe?
I was just saying early 07 then, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
If they put the R movie out, are you hoping for like a director's cut on DVD then?
Yeah, part of what we talked about when we were negotiating who we were going to go with, and again, like with this movie, we were in a really good position because it wasn't like we only had one option. Like, we got to sort of, feel out different places and see who was the best choice. But the place that we're going to be going with is really good with their DVD department, and I said to them, like, I really want to make sure that the first time the movie comes out on DVD, it's the unrated one with all the stuff, because as a fan, I hate it when you go and buy a movie and then 3 months later they put it out with more scenes and more stuff, and they just keep ripping the fans off left and right. I can't promise that there won't be more editions of the movie in 10 years or something like that, but at least as far as our contract goes, was that the first time the DVD comes out, it'll be the full movie, and that'll be it. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they stick to that.
Cool. Really appreciate you coming on here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Anything you want to tell everybody out there?
I guess just thank you to everybody for everything, and the fans that send me gifts and letters and stuff, and it's just like, I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I so appreciate having everybody here, and I hope when the movie comes out everybody digs it, and I guess the one thing I could say to just the horror community as a whole would be, like, stop letting them take advantage of you. If you know a movie sucks, don't go see it. And, I mean, I'm not saying that, like, oh, go support Hatchet because it is a rated R real horror movie or whatever. Don't go see Hatchet. I don't care. But just, like, let them know that you can't be taken advantage of, because they are taking advantage of us really bad. All these remakes and sequels and Japanese movies. If I see one more creepy Japanese kid crawl across the floor, it's just, like, but as long as we keep paying for it, they're going to keep doing it because they just want to make money. Mm-hmm. So let them know, like, what you'll take and what you won't take. And even if Hatchet doesn't fall into your category of what you would take, don't go see it. I don't care. But just, you know, stand up for yourselves and let's try to take it back again and start getting some original new characters out there.
I just have to say, I love the tagline. It's not a remake, it's not a sequel, and it's not based on a Japanese one.
You know, that was one of the only things that there wasn't an argument over. When I proposed that, it was instantly, everyone was like, okay, done. And that was it. And we actually had some backlash from that when we started screening for distributors because it offended them, because that's all they do. And they were kind of like, well, now whoever puts this out is kind of admitting that, you know, the other stuff they put out is just remakes and sequels and shit. Right. So it's it was a weird position to be in, and I think in hindsight some people would advise me that I shouldn't have used that as the tagline. But again, like, I was just making what I wanted to see and trying to make my point, whether people agree with it or not. But I think politically, if we had gone with something that's like, you know, he's gonna tear your soul apart or some gay shit, then we probably would have gotten a better response from distributors right away. But they were all a little kind of pissed off about that because it was directly attacking them. But somebody had to do it, and I hope it turns around. I got to admit, I'm really looking forward to the new Texas Chainsaw. I'm hearing nothing but good stuff about it. Mm-hmm. And some of these remakes are definitely cool, but, like, did we really need When a Stranger Calls? Did we need it the first time? We definitely don't need it again. And, like, some of the stuff that I keep getting called in on, like, it's ridiculous, the stuff they're remaking. They will remake anything. Like, the worst horror movie you can think of, they will remake. Slumber Party Massacre 3. Not even Slumber Party Massacre 1. 3. They will remake that because it's a prepackaged title, and they know that because people, that's just like the whole recognition thing, people will be like, oh yeah, I want to go see that. So, so stand up for yourselves and say no when you know that you're being fed crap, and support the stuff that you want to support. And we really dictate what's going to happen because, trust me, the guys making the decisions in Hollywood are not horror fans. They don't care. They don't really like it. They're just giving us what we pay for. So pay for the stuff you want. Don't pay for the stuff you don't want. And you can kind of dictate what you're going to get.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me.
Good luck on everything.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you very much.
This is R.A. Mihailoff, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and co-starring in the new Hatchet 2. You're listening to WithoutYourHeadRadio.com.